A janitor thinks he can fix this? Victoria Sterling's voice cut through the boardroom like a knife dipped in venom. As she gestured toward the sparking engine, her diamond bracelet glimmered under the fluorescent lights, as she waved her hand dramatically, as though the smell of motor oil itself offended her. Daniel Carter froze in the doorway, trash bag still clutched in his calloused hand. 24 executives stared at him, as if he were an intruder who didn't belong in their pristine temple of innovation. Victoria rose from her leather chair, the click of her crimson Louis Vuitton heels echoing off the marble floor like a judge's gavel. She walked toward Daniel, until her perfume, a mix of wealth and contempt, hung heavy in the air. "Here's a deal, maintenance boy, fix this $2 million engine that MIT engineers couldn't repair, and I'll marry you right here." She snapped her manicured fingers inches from his tired face. "When you fail, and you will, security will escort you out permanently." The boardroom fell silent. $50 million in pending contracts hung on this broken machine. Have you ever been dismissed so completely that someone bet their reputation on your failure? Tech Vanguard Industries loomed over Silicon Valley, like a monument of glass and steel, its 40 stories housing the country's most ambitious dreams of autonomous vehicles. Inside, billion-dollar ideas were born in sterile labs, and cutthroat boardrooms that smelled of leather and desperation. Victoria Sterling ruled this empire with precision and fear. At 38, her blonde hair was always tied into a perfect bun, her suits tailored sharp enough to draw blood. The tech world praised her as a visionary. Her employees whispered other words behind closed doors. And now, at the center of her empire, sat the company's crown jewel, a revolutionary AI-guided engine, designed to power a fleet of self-driving delivery trucks. 3 years of development, 47 patents, and the hopes of Silicon Valley's brightest minds, all reduced to a useless block of chrome and wires. For 6 weeks, the engine had mocked every attempt at repair. 3 teams of Ivy League engineers had tried and failed. 67 diagnostic tests had ended in nothing but error codes and frustration. The machine would start, run for exactly 14 minutes and 37 seconds, then overheat and shut down with the same mocking message. Harmonic disruption detected. Daniel Carter knew every hallway of Tech Vanguard. For 3 years he'd pushed his maintenance cart across its marble floors, invisible to the executives who stepped around him like he was part of the furniture. His badge read technical consultant, but everyone knew the truth. He emptied trash cans, polished floors, and endured the humiliation of being the most overqualified janitor in Silicon Valley. Once, his dreams were different. His community college engineering degree still hung in a cheap frame above the crib in his small apartment, a reminder of paths he never got to take. But after his wife's sudden passing, and with a 5-year-old daughter depending on him, college transfers and big dreams had to be sacrificed. He traded textbooks for extra shifts, blueprints for bills. Survival came first. Always. Now, as executives panicked over a $67 million crisis, Victoria paced like a predator smelling blood. Coffee cups piled up on the boardroom table, marking the layers of desperation like rings in a tree. $67 million, she screamed at her engineering team, her voice bouncing off the glass walls. That's what we lose if this engine isn't fixed by Friday. $67 million that could have given us market dominance in 3 major cities. The engineers, Harvard, MIT, Stanford pedigrees, sat frozen, their laptops glowing with the same unsolved error codes. Their 6-figure salaries and impressive resumes didn't matter. The engine's AI refused to cooperate. Every attempt ended in smoke, sparks, and failure. Their leader, Marcus Brooks, had the look of a man beaten down, dark circles hiding beneath makeup. Every solution tried and discarded. And through it all, Daniel swept quietly in the background, enduring stares that judged his presence as a mistake. Victoria's words cut like blades. Maybe we have too many people who don't belong here. Her eyes lingered on him, making her meaning clear. The engineers glanced at him, embarrassed, some agreeing silently. But Daniel said nothing. He'd learned invisibility was survival. Yet his mechanic's mind never stopped working. Late at night, while mopping the boardroom floors, he studied the engine's blueprints left scattered across tables. And what he saw was something no one else had noticed. The engine was built in Germany, using metric standards, but its AI calibration software had been developed in California, using imperial units, a simple mismatch, small enough to ignore, yet powerful enough to unravel everything. Pressure mounted like steam in a sealed kettle. Victoria used him as corporate theater, scheduling his cleaning duties during high-profile investor meetings, pointing him out like charity on display. Emails called him the cleaning guy, and threads speculated about his eventual termination as a cost-cutting measure. HR staff laughed with emojis at his expense. And yet, when the German investors finally arrived in their black Mercedes sedans, bringing with them the future of Tech Vanguard, Daniel stood in the background, invisible again. The men carried with them €100 million and reputations built on perfectionism. Alongside them was Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a legend in the automotive world. The fate of the company, and of Daniel Carter himself, now rested on an engine that refused to sing in harmony. Thursday morning, chaos struck. The engine's final test ended in smoke, sprinklers drenching engineers and drowning hope. Victoria gathered the entire company, 200 employees packed into the auditorium, German investors in the front row. Her voice trembled as she announced cuts, her eyes scanning for someone to blame. They stopped on Daniel. That's when he made the mistake. He raised his hand. Ma'am, his voice echoed through the microphone, calm but steady. I think the problem isn't in the software at all. It's in the harmonic calibration. 200 heads turned like sunflowers toward the light. Investors leaned forward. Dr. Rodriguez raised her eyebrow in curiosity, and Victoria's face shifted, from disbelief to rage to something far more dangerous: opportunity. The real story was just beginning. Detroit, 1995. The auto industry was shedding jobs like a wounded giant, but Earl Carter's corner garage on 8 Mile still hummed with purpose. At 72, he moved with the deliberate grace of a master craftsman, his weathered hands reading engines like sacred texts. 12-year-old Daniel pressed his face to the foggy shop window, watching his father revive a broken Mustang that 3 other mechanics had pronounced dead. Earl's knuckles traced the engine block with the tenderness of a surgeon examining a patient. Come here, son, he called without looking up. Time you learned something useful. That summer changed everything. While other kids raced bikes and mashed controller buttons, Daniel spent long days inside a cathedral of grease and steel. Earl had risen from apprentice to shop owner, the slow way: one honest repair, one grateful neighbor, one late night at a time. In the quiet between ratchet clicks, he taught a philosophy that settled deep into Daniel's bones. An engine doesn't care about resumes or boardrooms, Earl would say, guiding Daniel's palm onto a humming valve cover. It only answers to people who listen. Daniel learned to diagnose by sound, vibration, even smell. A hiccup in rhythm hinted at worn bearings. A sweet bitter whiff told of coolant kissing hot metal. These weren't textbook tricks. They were inherited instincts from a man who believed machines had voice. By 16, Daniel could tear down and rebuild a block blindfolded, mapping the secret dance of pistons, valves, and timing chains with his fingertips. Community college professors later blinked at the clarity of his explanation. He didn't just know diagrams. He knew how steel felt when it was right. Life, indifferent to talent, rethreaded the bolts. Earl collapsed of a heart attack under a Cadillac during Daniel's senior year. The funeral overflowed with customers who told stories about roadside rescues and late-night fixes. The shop closed. The tools were sold to catch up on bills. Daniel's inheritance wasn't money. It was a compass. Respect the machine. Learn its language. Never let pride drown out the sound of truth. He carried that compass into adulthood. He earned an associate degree in mechanical engineering on scholarship and overtime, sleeping in library chairs between graveyard shifts. He married Lena, his hometown friend who laughed with her whole face and believed in futures you had to build yourself. Their daughter, Maya, arrived with a squeal that reset every priority Daniel had ever held. Then fate snapped the timing belt. A sudden illness took Lena a year later, leaving Daniel with a crib, a stack of hospital paperwork, and a vow whispered into a tiny ear: Daddy's not going anywhere. Transfers to a 4-year program turned into a folder labeled someday. Bills came with the regularity of a metronome. He took whatever work kept the lights on: small shops, factory maintenance, warehouse. A temp agency pitched an opening at Tech Vanguard, technical consultant on the badge, mops and trash routes on the schedule. The pay covered childcare and rent. Dignity could wait. Maya could not. He still studied at night after storybooks and online courses in powertrains and control systems, journals propped open beside bottles and burp cloths, blueprints downloaded and highlighted, pages curling on a thrift store desk. He kept his tools sharp and his ears sharper. Earl's voice never left. Listen, the engine will tell you. Now he stood in Tech Vanguard's auditorium, 200 faces tilting toward the stage lights, German investors in the front row, a CEO pacing like a storm behind glass. The company's crown jewel, a revolutionary AI-guided engine, meant to power autonomous delivery fleets, had mocked every attempt at repair. For 6 weeks it ran, then died at 14 minutes and 37 seconds, coughing the same cryptic message: harmonic disruption. Millions evaporated every day. It sat silent. Daniel should have kept his head down. Invisibility was survival. But when Victoria Sterling started promising layoffs to non-essentials, her gaze pausing just long enough to mark him, something flared. He lifted his hand. Ma'am, he said into the auditorium's perfect acoustics,
I think the problem isn't software integration, it's harmonic calibration. Silence fell like a shop rag over a spinning fan. The investors leaned forward. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, legend of powertrain design, uncapped. Victoria's smile sharpened. If humiliation was theater, she would sell tickets. She offered him a wager framed as opportunity and backed by threats. Fix in 2 hours what elite teams hadn't in 6 weeks. On a live stream, under lights, with security fail, and he'd be escorted out and quietly blacklisted. Succeed, and there would be titles and stock options she never meant to honor. Dr. Rodriguez intervened, insisting on neutral oversight. The crowd surged toward the executive floor, phones raised to capture either spectacle or miracle. In the glass-walled boardroom, the engine sat like a stainless steel judge, surrounded by scopes, thermal probes and laptops spewing errors. Victoria positioned herself by the windows, broadcasting with a practiced influencer's poise. Comments poured in. Engineers, gawkers, vulture. Daniel set down his cart, rolled up his sleeves, and placed both hands flat on the engine block. He closed his eyes and breathed. The boardroom fell away. He listened past the hum of HVAC and the whisper of expensive suits. He listened for Earl's heartbeat in steel. What he felt was an argument inside the machine. Perfect components, speaking in one language, a control system answering in another. Mechanical box scored for software jazz. No wonder it choked at the same minute mark. The dissonance crescendoed on schedule. He opened his eye. It's fighting itself, he said. Built in Munich, to metric specs, calibrated in California by software that expects imperial tolerances. The AI's trying to correct deviations that don't exist, forcing a rhythm the hardware can't and shouldn't hold. The boardroom held its collective breath. Klaus Miller adjusted his platinum watch, his German composure showing the faintest crack of intrigue. Dr. Rodriguez leaned in, her eyes gleaming with the kind of curiosity that only appeared when she sensed truth. The executives, once dismissive, now shifted nervously in their seats. Victoria's smile never faltered, though tension rippled beneath her flawless exterior. You're suggesting, Mr. Carter, that our multi-million-dollar teams missed something as basic as a conversion error. Her voice dripped with mockery, sharp enough to draw blood. This isn't a high school shop class. This is tech Vanguard. Daniel didn't blink. It's not just a conversion error, it's harmony. The AI and the hardware are playing two different songs. At first they can mask the discord, but by 14 minutes and 37 seconds, the dissonance overwhelms the system. It shuts itself down to survive. The words hung in the air. Rodriguez tapped her fountain pen against the table, then gestured. Show up. With a nod, Daniel requested permission to start the engine. The room grew still as he twisted the ignition. The machine roared alive, its vibrations filling the space like a living creature roused from restless sleep. To most it sounded strong, defiant even. To Daniel it sounded wrong, an orchestra off by half a beat. He leaned close, eyes half closed, listening as Earl once taught him. Listen at 2,800 RPM, Daniel called over the noise. Hear that? The pistons are in their natural rhythm, but the AI sensors are reading a mismatch. The software assumes American tolerances, sloppy by German standards. It's like a conductor waving frantically at musicians already in perfect time. He pointed at the oscilloscope. Spikes littered the readout like warning flares. Your engineers weren't wrong. They just weren't listening to the right thing. Marcus Brooks, the MIT team lead, shoved through the crowd. We tested harmonics extensively. This theory is incomplete. Daniel interrupted gently, his tone not arrogant but steady, like a man certain of the ground beneath him. You tested the harmonics the AI expected, not the ones the engine was actually producing. The investors exchanged quick phrases in clipped German. Klaus Miller's brows rose. This wasn't the rambling of a janitor. This was precision. This was fluency in a language most had never bothered to learn. Rodriguez's pen scratched furiously in her notebook. If you're right, she said, then every error code, every failure stems from a cultural miscommunication between metric and imperial mechanical precision versus software assumption. Daniel nodded once. Exactly, and like any broken relationship, what they need isn't replacement, it's translation. Victoria's lips thinned. Enough riddles. How do you intend to fix it? Maintenance boy. He ignored the moving with deliberate calm. Daniel laid out the blueprints he'd studied in secret during late-night cleaning shifts. His calloused finger traced numbers etched in black and blue. The crankshaft diameter is 87.63 millimeters, machined in Munich. The AI assumes 3.450 inches, mathematically identical on paper, but mechanically divergent. Rodriguez leaned closer. The difference is thousandths of a millimeter, which becomes catastrophic. Daniel countered. When the AI keeps correcting something that doesn't exist, it's like forcing a violinist to retune every note while the piano plays perfectly. Eventually the whole symphony collapses. He pulled a small part from the diagnostics cabinet, a simple, perforated disc of polished metal. It looked unimpressive, almost laughably. Gasps rippled across the room. A harmonic dampener, Daniel explained. It doesn't rewrite code or remanufacture steel. It simply bridges the gap, absorbing the resonance mismatch, and letting the AI and hardware meet in the middle. Victoria scoffed. You expect me to believe a $50 part will solve a 6-week multi-million-dollar crisis? Daniel met her gaze, unflinching. Sometimes the smallest tools make the biggest difference. My father used to say, you don't silence an engine, you help it find its voice. He installed the dampener with sure, practiced hands. Each movement was precise, economical. It was the choreography of a man who'd rebuilt engines at midnight in borrowed garages, one eye on his sleeping daughter in the corner. His scars were his credentials, his calluses, his degree. Rodriguez watched intently. Where did you learn harmonic theory? Daniel tightened the last bolt and whispered, from a man who believed engines had souls, and from every night I stayed up making sure my little girl never went to bed hungry. The room was silent, except for the hum of anticipation. The German investors leaned forward, phones forgotten. Even the engineers, once disdainful, now stared with grudging respect. Ready, Daniel said. Rodriguez stepped to the diagnostics, hands poised. Start. Daniel turned the key. The engine ignited, then settled into a smooth, confident purr. The harsh knocking was gone. The room vibrated not with chaos, but with harmony. The monitors lit up with green across every diagnostic. Pressure stable, temperature optimal. RPM locked at 3,400, with 0 deviation. For the first time in 6 weeks, the machine sang in perfect tune. Rodriguez's eyes widened, her voice reverent. In 40 years I've never seen readings this clean. She turned toward Daniel, her pen trembling. Your father would be proud. Victoria's face drained of color. Her live stream comments exploded. Engineers from Tesla, Ford and beyond chimed in with questions, admiration, disbelief. What had begun as spectacle was turning into history. Klaus Muller, his voice clipped and precise, carried authority across the room. This analysis is mathematically sound. This solution is elegant. Herr Carter, your methodology has impressed us. Applause erupted, not polite, not corporate, but genuine. Daniel stood still, hands resting lightly on the engine block, feeling not just the hum of machinery, but the echo of his father's shop, the weight of promises kept, and the steady rhythm of a life rebuilt through persistence. And for the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe, maybe he belonged here. The engine's steady hum filled the boardroom like a hymn of vindication. What had once mocked 6 weeks of failures, now purred with effortless grace. Executives pressed closer to the glass walls, their eyes wide, their phones forgotten. The dreaded 14-minute mark arrived and passed, then 20 minutes more. Still the system held, synchronized, unstoppable. Outside, the prototype delivery truck flickered to life for the first time in weeks. Its headlights pierced the courtyard, sensors calibrated, GPS aligned. Slowly, the vehicle rolled backward, navigated around obstacles, and executed a perfect parallel park that drew spontaneous applause. To the employees crowded by the windows, it felt like a resurrection. Victoria stood frozen, her phone still live streaming to tens of thousands, who were watching the collapse of her narrative in real time. The comments, once filled with predictions of Daniel's humiliation, now erupted in hashtags celebrating his triumph. Carter method trended alongside engineering. Just tech insiders debated harmonic resonance and measurement tolerances, while others simply wrote, a single dad just outsmarted Silicon Valley's best. Rodriguez, eyes still locked on the diagnostics, finally spoke. Shut it down. We've seen enough. The engine sighed to a halt, its silence ringing louder than applause. Rodriguez turned, her notebook closed with deliberate finality. That, she said, voice carrying across the stunned crowd, was extraordinary. Where others chased shadows, you translated chaos into harmony. Elegant, brilliant, cost-effective. Klaus Müller stepped forward, every inch the German industrialist. His handshake was firm, his words clipped. Herr Carter, your methodology impressed our entire delegation. This is the kind of thinking that builds partnerships. He turned to the board, Our investment increases by 20% on one condition. This man leads our European diagnostics program. The boardroom erupted. Gasps, whispers, frantic calculation. An extra 20 million euros meant global dominance, and it hinged on the man they'd dismissed as janitorial filler. Victoria tried to recover, her voice trembling but sharp. This is irregular. We can't hand senior engineering to a maintenance worker just because he succeeded where your teams failed. Rodriguez cut in, her voice laced with authority, sharpened by 4 decades of credibility. Because he solved, in 2 hours, what your consultants bled millions over. Because he listened when arrogance deafened the rest. Her words sliced clean through the tension. Executives lowered their eyes. Investors nodded gravely, and Victoria's mask cracked. The confident CEO reduced to a figure trembling before judgment. Daniel said nothing. He stood quietly, one hand on the engine block, the other brushing the grease from his palms. For years he'd endured invisibility, insults, whispered jokes about the cleaning guy. Now silence meant victory. The applause swelled again, this time louder, richer. Engineers who once scoffed at him, now reached out, eager to learn. Marcus Brooks stepped forward, humility softening his features. On behalf of my team, we apologize. We'd be honored to collaborate, to study your methods. We thought credentials were everything, but you just taught us otherwise. Daniel nodded once, his voice calm. Engines don't care about degrees, they care about truth. If you respect their rhythm, they'll never lie to you. The crowd erupted in cheers. Victoria, cornered, tried one final gambit. This company is mine. My leadership built this tower, this reputation. You can't just. But she stopped, because she could see it in their faces. The board, the investors, even her own executive. Confidence in her had evaporated. The same live stream she'd staged as a humiliation spectacle had become her public obituary. Klaus Miller's voice sealed it. Partnership requires sound leadership judgment. Today's events raise serious concern. Board member Patricia Brooks added the final blow. A review of management practices will begin immediately. Allowing a senior engineer to mop floors while millions were wasted is not vision, it's negligence. The verdict was clear. Victoria Sterling's reign of fear was over. For Daniel, the world shifted. In less than 2 hours, he had gone from invisible janitor to senior diagnostics engineer, from mocked maintenance worker to global program lead. More than titles or salaries, it meant stability. For Maya, for their future. No more nights juggling side jobs. No more telling his daughter maybe someday. Someday had arrived. Weeks later, as policy changes swept through tech Vanguard, Daniel's fingerprints were everywhere. Employee suggestion reviews became mandatory. Mentorship programs flourished. Diversity and inclusion weren't buzzwords, they were practices. Rooted in his story, applications surged, stock prices rose, and the company became a symbol of unexpected talent, recognized at last. But Daniel's proudest moment wasn't in boardrooms or news articles. It came one quiet evening when Maya, clutching her stuffed rabbit, pointed at the framed certificate on their apartment wall. Senior diagnostics engineer. Daddy, she asked softly, does this mean you don't have to clean floors anymore? Daniel knelt, lifting her onto his lap. It means, he whispered, that if you listen closely, the world will always tell you its truth. Engines, people, even life. You just have to be patient enough to hear it. She grinned, laying her head against his chest. And in that small perfect moment, Daniel knew his father had been right all along. Engines don't care about diplomas or status. They respond to those who listen. And tonight so did the world. 2 weeks later, the consequences landed with surgical precision. Victoria Sterling was stripped of her CEO title, reassigned as strategic advisor, her salary cut nearly in half, her authority reduced to token gestures. The board wasn't looking for lawsuits. They wanted control restored. Her empire of fear had been dismantled quietly, but decisively. The irony ran deep. After years of mocking Daniel Carter's potential, she now sat through mandatory workshops on inclusive leadership and unconscious bias. Her trainer, Dr. Elena Rodriguez, who approached human transformation with the same relentless precision she brought to engineering. Meanwhile, Daniel's rise didn't stop with one engine. His promotion to senior diagnostics engineer came with a 150% salary increase, stock options, and leadership over a task force dedicated to inclusive and New policies required every employee's suggestion to be formally reviewed, no matter their position. Tech Vanguard stock climbed 15% as the viral video transformed into the company's most unexpected marketing applications poured in, many citing the story of a single dad mechanic who outperformed Silicon Valley's best. 3 months later, in the cafeteria, Victoria approached him quietly. Gone were the designer heels and corporate armor. She spoke with the soft humility of someone reshaped by consequence. "I owe you an apology," she said, "and I'd like your guidance on how to lead differently." Daniel studied her, remembering his father's lessons and his daughter's bright eyes. "Everyone deserves a chance to grow," he replied evenly. "The question is whether you're willing to listen as closely to people as you would to a machine that needs repair." Corporate justice had been served, measured, corrective, and ultimately redemptive. 6 months later, Daniel Carter stood in Tech Vanguard's expanded engineering facility, watching German technicians install equipment for the European production line. Trucks across Munich, Frankfurt, and Berlin now purred with the harmonic perfection he'd unlocked in a moment of desperation. The diploma from community college still hung in his modest apartment, but now it shared wall space with patents, industry awards, and a photograph of him shaking hands with Klaus Müller at the Munich Auto Show. Earl's garage wisdom had evolved into million-dollar decisions that bridged continents. Sometimes the most powerful expertise comes wrapped in the most overlooked packages.
The question isn't who has the degrees, it's who has the dedication to truly understand the problem. If this story inspired you to look beyond assumptions and recognize hidden talent, smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Have you ever seen someone's potential ignored until they finally proved themselves? Share your story in the comments below. You might inspire our next viral tale of justice and recognition. And for those watching closely, there's a hidden detail at minute 432 that reveals Victoria's true character. Watch again and tell us what you spotted.